Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation's weekly newscast for the week of May 6, 2024. This week, our lead story brings us to Kansas. Stand by, Dorothy. Things are getting weird. Pro-sportsmen's legislation on the move in Louisiana. We got some good stuff there. Insanity continues in New Mexico with a rabid thirst for gun control measures. Couple good pieces from the Hill. We'll bring you both of those, Farm Bill and some pro-sportsmen's legislation. But let's get to it. Like I said, we're doing our best Dorothy trip over to Kansas. We welcome in past guest Jake Gould to report on some commission restructuring shenanigans. Jake, welcome to the program. Give us the download, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Fred. So during Kansas's veto session, there was a bill where they basically took a car insurance bill, stripped the language from that, and inserted some language from a bill that had some movement previously in the session that would completely rearrange how the commissioners of the Kansas Game and Parks Commission are appointed. And, talking to partners, a lot of people reaching out, and there's some concern behind the bill. And so right now, it passed both Senate and the House and was sent to the governor. So it is in her hands now to see what happens with that.
So you report here that it was amended to abolish, that's a strong word, the current commission while also changing the appointment process. So what are we looking at here? And what's their alternative to the current structure?
So the abolish language was in SB 347, which failed due to legislative deadlines early in the year. Luckily, that abolishment language was not in the version. But this new version they're looking for is having 4 appointed by the governor, 1 by the president of the Senate, 1 by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and 1 by the Attorney General. So opening it up, there could be partisan politics taking place in wildlife management decisions. That's where the issue comes in with this current bill.
Yeah, for sure. It looks and sounds almost exactly like what we have going on in Vermont with Senate Bill 258, and then that's obviously what we have here is a playbook in real time being played out, and we've reported on it in the past that on the coast we see this foolishness, and expeditiously so, it's making its way into the middle of the country. We covered Kentucky. Now you've got this going on in Kansas. I know there's a couple others. This is madness. And like you just said, it opens it up to partisan politics. And that is no way to manage wildlife. Look at Colorado with the ballot initiative, ballot box management. This is no way to go about such things. And you've rightly pointed that out. What's the sentiment on the ground there in Kansas, Jake? Are any of the sportsmen's groups rallying to this cause as they did in Kentucky and as they're currently doing in Vermont and Colorado?
I honestly think this situation is a little different. This really isn't antis pushing for control on the commission or, another department taking control of the commission. In the bill itself, it states that the commissioners have to preserve Kansas's right to hunt and fish, which they have the constitutional right to hunt and fish in Kansas. So having that language in the bill, really protecting, the constituents' rights to hunt and fish. Without that language, there might be a little more issue, I believe. But having that in there really protects from those antis coming in, trying to, strip us of our hunting and fishing and trapping rights.
So is there a line of thought that even though it's codified in the state constitution there in Kansas, but there could be regulatory tomfoolery at the agency level?
I suppose there could be. I mean, that's with anything, but these where this is stemming from is a lot of the legislators were had some dissatisfaction with the commission. In last year, they reduced the number of non-resident deer tags, and they set the non-resident turkey tag system to a lottery system.
Mhm.
They also, and mind you, none of this portion, none of it was proposed, but they had, think groups, meetings, conversations about the potential of banning baiting in Kansas. And that really upset a lot of people. And I think a lot of this is stemming from these recent changes that maybe upset a few people.
Well, as many of these issues are, they're multi-leveled, but in the end,
Right.
w it's not the way to go, so well, what's the next steps here? What can we, look forward to or not look forward to happening in Kansas? What's the best outcome here that can happen right now?
Best outcome, I believe, is if the governor will veto it, which, you know, it's in her hands. So we can't really say right now. And we have to wait for her to put pen to paper to either sign the bill into action or veto it. So we'll see from there.
Alright, we will stand by for further reporting from Kansas. Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Thanks again to Jake for coming on, bringing us that story from Kansas. Let's go around the nation and see what we've got going on. Louisiana, pro-sportsman legislation on the move. This is brought to us by Mark Lance. Two good pieces of legislation here. One addressing hunter harassment, and then the other addressing the use of tracking dogs. So some good stuff here. Let's just go to the highlights. HB 409, authored by Louisiana Legislative Caucus member Gabe Ferment, extends prohibition on the harassment and disturbance of trappers, hunters, and fishermen to all lands and waters managed by the state. And HB 802, authored by caucus member Representative Jason DeWitt, authorizes the use of dogs to retrieve and dispatch mortally wounded deer with the use of lights, except on wildlife management areas. Both pieces of legislation passed the House unanimously and reported favorably out of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources. That's a good deal. The hunter harassment stuff is I personally started doing some research on it about some interesting items on it throughout the country. It looks like most states have protections in here, but it kind of gets, well, the lawyers get a hold of it and it gets kind of weird. In short, for Louisiana's purposes, they have extended this as reported and protecting sportsmen and women in Louisiana from such harassment. So that's good. We certainly need it, and things are getting weirder out there. And I think every year there's a handful of stories that make their way through the old socials, and they're new, and people are getting crazier out there in the woods and the water. Well, anyway, these protections are necessary and needed, unfortunately. So, getting to the dog use, this is good. Good legislation here as well. The use of tracking dogs after legal shooting hours allows the use of lights while tracking wounded deer, allows the hunter to dispatch wounded deer even after legal shooting hours, and allows licensed hunters and trackers to enter onto private property so long as they have written permission from the landowner. Allowing these practices to take place assists the hunters in making every effort to retrieve their game, so they're not only doing right by the animal, but also increasing their chances of bringing home some of that delicious venison. So, um, this is another positive step here in Louisiana, where I live, in New Hampshire. It is a thing. It's a little different. I'm pretty impressed by what Louisiana's done here. In some states, and in my state specifically, you have to be a licensed dog tracker to be able to dispatch um, after hours and with a light. It's a great resource, but for the ability of the hunter to have their own pup go out there, track down a deer, and be able to take care of that right there on the spot. That's fantastic, and it gets back to the waste of the deer and not recovering it, and it does provide every opportunity to bring that deer home. Where, again, back my experience where I live, you have to call a licensed tracker to come out to you, and there's only so many of those people in the state, so sometimes, your closest dog tracker could be 45 minutes, an hour away if they're even available. Meanwhile, depending on what time of the season it is, your deer is out there, presumably lying dead somewhere. Is a shot got misplaced or just something weird happened. Um, it's after dark. It could be warm, and you just don't want that meat to spoil. None of us want those animals to waste. That's not what we're out there doing. So tip of the cap here in Louisiana to make that happen. Um, once it hopefully once it passes, it'll become it'll become law as they now await debate on the Senate floor. So halfway home, I think, on that. But that's those are great developments there, and hopefully the protections and the resource of a tracking dog will help many of those sportsmen and women in Louisiana. So good on you down south there. All right, let's go to New Mexico. Barry and I touched on this, I think, the last time he was on the show, referencing um, the Governor Grisham out there and her. I'm trying to put this politely. Her obsession with something to get to her desk to. I think it wasn't very long ago. She's just trying to outlaw the Second Amendment altogether. So let's just bring you what Barry's reporting. The regular session in New Mexico legislature closed as a large amount of the anti-gun and anti-sportsman agenda mostly failed. Of the dozen or so anti-bills that were proposed, only 2 made it through to the governor, who has repeatedly made it clear that anti-gun policies are among her top priorities. Therefore, any talk about a special session, especially in the wake of the failed agenda, is definitely a cause for immediate concern for New Mexico's sportsmen and women. So New Mexico ended in the middle of February on the 15th. Grisham has called for the special session to convene by July 18th. She's calling this in as a focus on public safety, including at least one issue pertaining to firearms, and the session is expected to last 3 days. So New Mexico alternates year to year between a 30-day session and a 60-day session. Typically, the 30-day session is intended to deal with the budgetary concerns, and then the 60-day session is for public policy. The upcoming session is expected to last, like I said, 3 days. And since assuming office in 2019, the governor there has called 4 other special sessions and has made it known early in February of this year she intended to do so again. So this is more of a routine feature of the administration and extra efforts to get what she wants. While any of the many failed anti-gun and anti-sportsman bills could certainly come up again, New Mexico Senate Majority Leader Pete Worth said all parties involved have agreed that any consideration of additional gun legislation will be held off until next year's regular 60-day session. So it comes back to the conversations we've had before. You guys got to vote. All this can go away mostly, if you guys vote these people out. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, the issues themselves won't go away, but the CEO of your state begging for this stuff to hit her desk, and we've seen this in Massachusetts as well and other parts of the country. They come in laser focused, know what they want, and by gosh, they're going to find one way or another to do it, which, obviously on display here in New Mexico. When these people are up for re-election, you can get your friends and like-minded folks together and give them an old pink slip and have them move on with their professional careers elsewhere other than being the CEO of your state. So good luck in New Mexico. You guys got your work cut out for you, but you can fix it. So find out when people are running for re-election or coming in and ensure they no longer have a seat. All right, let's go to the Hill. 2 items to talk about. Kent Keene brings us this on the Farm Bill. House and Senate Ag Committee chairs release initial Farm Bill plans. Last week, chairs of the House and Senate Ag Committees released their plans for the next iteration of the Farm Bill, with the Senate Committee's majority releasing actual legislation, the House publishing a framework. Because each chamber is controlled by different political parties, there's understandably differences between the plans, which likely represent starting points for the future Farm Bill negotiations. Fortunately for us, sportsmen and women, each version contains several priorities identified by the sporting conservation community, breeding an optimistic outlook as the Farm Bill conservation conversation continues. Hopefully this gets done. With these coming out, this thing it was supposed to be reauthorized and after 18, got a 1-year extension. So it needs to be updated and reauthorized in short. So hopefully, per this reporting, we got some positive momentum here and get that next Farm Bill iteration agreed upon through both chambers and hopefully on for a signature. Lastly on this, while there are consistencies between the plans by each committee's leadership, it is important to recognize that these versions still differ in several areas that are of high importance for many members of Congress, particularly as they relate to aspects outside of conservation forestry titles. Because of this, there's still much to work on as it relates to the Farm Bill, but all sides have indicated an interest in advocating legislation that has strong bipartisan support. Congressional Sportsmen Foundation will continue to advocate for the interests of sportsmen and women and this critical piece of legislation. There you go. Thank you, Kent, for bringing us that. I don't want to be hyperbolic saying that's probably the most positive news we've heard on that in a while, but I think it is. So we'll take it. Finally, from Taylor Smith's CSF Access and State Management Authority priorities passed the U.S. House. Last week, the U.S. House of Representatives passed 2 priorities of the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation on bipartisan votes. First, the House voted to pass H.R. 615, the Protecting Access for Hunters and Anglers Act, an important bill led by former Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus leader and current CSC member, Representative Rob Whitman, to protect the use of traditional ammunition and fishing tackles on certain federal lands unless a specific criteria is met. Additionally, House passed H.R. 764, the Trust the Science Act, which will delist the gray wolf across the lower 48 and return management authority of these recovered species to the State Fish and Wildlife Agency. Prior to the vote, CSF conducted direct outreach to many members of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, including sending a House caucus alert to help secure bipartisan floor vote. Let's dive into these two just a little bit more. The lead issue, the Protecting Access for Hunters and Anglers Act, would prohibit secretaries of Agriculture and Interior from banning the use of lead ammunition and fishing tackle on select federal lands and waters unless certain science-based triggers are met. The legislation did not remove the federal government's ability to implement site-specific prohibitions on the use of traditional ammunition and fishing tackle, but it establishes a criteria to be met. Specifically, the federal lands of focus include lands and waters managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Forest Service. One group says the lead's killing everything. The other group says the science isn't bearing that out. And I like what I'm reading here because this sets a precedent. It sets that trigger as Taylor wrote. And then you can take it on a site-by-site basis. That's good. Instead of an outright ban, which we've seen in the States. Last year it happened in Maine. Some of the bigger tracts of federally owned properties have done the same thing. So it reads well. So hopefully this something like this can get done here. And like I said, take it case by case, site by site, and then meet those benchmarks. All right, and let's get into the second one that's a little bit more easier for me to explain. The Trust the Science Act would reinstitute the 2020 rule to delist the gray wolf in the lower 48 from the threatened and endangered species list, which was vacated by a district court in 2022. There's enough gray wolves on the landscape, some exceeding population goal setting, and what you have is the signs bearing out, yes, it's time to remove them, delist them, manage them, return that management to the specific state agencies, and then a court comes in and says, no, we're going to put them back on there. It's a endless circle of scientific delisting and judicial reinstatement. And it, as Taylor hits on, it undermines the integrity of the Endangered Species Act. I mean, we covered that with Chairman Westerman back on our feature show when we had him on, talking about ESA and talking about how the intent of that is good, and I think the reporting was like 3% of species that have been on that have actually been recovered and removed. You look at the wolves, you look at the grizzly bears, the greater Yellowstone grizzly bear. A handful of years ago, you had that species come off the list just to have judges jump right in there and throw it back on, especially when they were looking at a very conservative, like I think it was under 10 lottery system tags to control that population. And as soon as that was announced, they went in and put the walls back up and no touching the bears. And anyway, another good piece of legislation here that would very much like to see pass out of the Senate. The bills are heading there now for further consideration. Two very easy pieces of legislation that could get done in an election year, and would be nice to see them hit the administration, the president's desk, and get that done. That's it. That's all I got to say about it. It seems like common sense, and as many of these things, it's kind of frustrating that we have to go through the process of this, but alas, here we are. So, thank you, Taylor, for your report. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not get the EPUB of the Sportsman's Voice publication, I invite you to go and subscribe. congressionalsportsman.org. You can go on there for free. Register to receive that every Monday. That gets published about 5 o'clock Eastern. all these stories and more. When I say more, there is a cool hook and bullet section here with, again, more news stories from around the nation that are curated from the team on the ground there, and kind of add to some past stories. For example, we reported on the 72-hour waiting period in the state of Maine that was passed and became law without the governor's signature recently. That is unfortunate. And in that reporting, I mentioned that it would have a detriment on the conservation funding of people not being able to, or being inconvenienced at the very least, to purchase firearms, and would likely go elsewhere to a neighboring state, New Hampshire, for those needs. And this story from the Bangor Daily News, again, this is a hook and bullet story that you can find with your subscription, tells us the headline from May 2nd, Kittery Trading Post threatens to move firearm business to New Hampshire over new gun law. For those that don't know, that is a huge deal. Kittery Trading Post is probably got to be top 3, top 2 in firearm sales in the state of Maine. I'm don't quote me on that. I'm guessing as an individual who frequents that store, but knowing the size and the volume that it does, it's up there with the being headquarters. I mean, you got Cabela's up in Scarborough, Maine. So when you're looking at dealers, I mean, that's got to be the top 3 in the state. And there's other great family-owned businesses throughout. But the volume, the amount of business that store does, that is right over the border from New Hampshire, off of 95. So you got, people, it's a tourist destination, really, but you have people from all over New England and probably some of the northern mid-Atlantic states coming up 95 to make their purchases, to do more shopping. It's a fantastic store. There's just so much to look at, but their gun floor is incredible. And if they took that business and came over to New Hampshire, which personally I'm saying I'll welcome you, but this is a direct cause and effect of bad legislation. Now, all those firearm sales that would have had funding, matching funds from PR, now I'm going to go somewhere else potentially. So anyway, all that to say, in that example, and it's a nice follow-up to our report, is in the hook and bullet soundbite section. So please do go on there, subscribe, check it out, and get some more links, and just keep up what's going on around the nation for sure. Because as Jake and I discussed, there's coordinated attacks. The playbook is in effect. They are running plays in not the typical places. You think you're safe in the middle of the country, and there's good hunting heritage, shooting sports traditions, and it's no one's safe from this stuff, and it has been deployed, and they're running the plays. So you got to be aware of what's going on and engage when you see it. So anyway, soapbox over. Guys, thanks so much for hanging in and joining us for this week. On Thursday, our feature presentation, Sportsman's Voice podcast, features the one and only Jana Waller, Julie McQueen. We're going to cut it up. This was a very enjoyable conversation. It always is when I catch up with both of them, especially at the same time. So look forward to Janet and Jules on Thursday. Like, subscribe, rate, we're available. Take us with you everywhere you go on all your favorite podcast platforms. Share the links in your socials, all the standard stuff. Guys, every time you do it, it's helping our show get pushed up the charts, get put in front of people so they can discover it. We think this is very important information. That's why we do the work that we do on the ground in the state houses on the Hill. We want to make sure people are aware of what's going on, and then inspire them to at least go out in November and vote and help the cause of our sporting community. We're the only ones that can do it. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your remaining hunt days if you're still hunting turkeys. We are in the thick of it here in the Northeast, so happy to have that going on. Guys, we are your inside connection to outdoor legislation. Thanks so much for bringing us along. Until next week, we will see you later. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.